The desert sun burned mercilessly as Staff Sergeant Marcus Rivera stepped off the transport helicopter at Forward Operating Base Viper in Afghanistan. Dust swirled around his boots as he shouldered his gear bag and surveyed his new assignment. This was his third deployment, but his first time working with the elite SEAL teams stationed here. Marcus was a sniper, one of the best the Army had ever produced. His record spoke for itself: over 200 confirmed kills, numerous commendations, and a reputation that preceded him wherever he went. But today, he felt like a fish out of water among these Navy SEALs who moved with a different kind of confidence, a different swagger. "You must be Rivera," called out a voice from behind him. Marcus turned to see a group of SEALs approaching, their uniforms crisp despite the harsh environment. The leader, a tall man with steel-gray eyes, extended his hand. "I'm Lieutenant Commander James Mitchell. Welcome to our little slice of paradise." Marcus shook his hand firmly. "Thank you, sir. Ready to get to work." Commander Mitchell nodded approvingly. "We'll see about that. First, let's get you settled and introduced to the team." He gestured toward the group behind him. "These are some of my best operators: Petty Officer Rodriguez, Petty Officer Thompson, and Chief Williams." Each man stepped forward to shake Marcus's hand. Their grips were firm, their eyes sizing him up. Marcus could tell they were good soldiers, but he also sensed something else, a subtle distance, as if they were waiting to see if this Army sniper could measure up to their standards. "We've heard about your shooting skills," Rodriguez said with a slight smirk. "Impressive numbers on paper." "On paper and in the field," Marcus replied evenly. He wasn't one to boast, but he also wouldn't be intimidated. As they walked toward the barracks, Chief Williams fell into step beside Marcus. "So what brought an Army boy to play with the big kids?" he asked with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Special assignment," Marcus replied. "Command thought you could use some long-range support for the upcoming operation." "We can handle our own long-range work," Thompson chimed in. "But I guess it never hurts to have backup." Marcus bit back his response. He'd dealt with inter-service rivalry before, but something about the way these SEALs talked suggested they saw him as more of a burden than an asset. He decided to let his work speak for itself. The barracks were Spartan but functional. Marcus claimed an empty bunk and began unpacking his gear. As he pulled his shirts from his bag, he felt eyes on him. Looking up, he saw several SEALs watching him with curious expressions. "What's that on your arm?" Rodriguez asked, pointing to Marcus's left shoulder, where the edge of a tattoo was visible beneath his t-shirt. Marcus glanced down at his shoulder. "Just a tattoo." "Come on, don't be shy," Thompson laughed. "Let's see it." Marcus hesitated for a moment, then pulled his shirt off to change into a fresh one. The tattoo was immediately visible, a detailed black and white image covering most of his left shoulder and upper arm. But what drew their attention wasn't the artistic quality or the size. It was the subject matter. The tattoo depicted a small house with a white picket fence. In the yard, a man in military uniform was pushing a young girl on a swing while a woman watched from the porch, smiling. It was peaceful, domestic, almost innocent in its simplicity. The SEALs exchanged glances, and Rodriguez let out a snort of laughter. "Seriously? That's your ink? A little house with a fence and a swing set?" Thompson shook his head in disbelief. "What are you, a soccer dad?" Chief Williams joined in the laughter. "I was expecting skulls, eagles, maybe a snake or something, but a family picnic? That's precious, Army." Marcus pulled on his fresh shirt without responding, his jaw tightening slightly. He'd heard comments about his tattoo before, but never quite so openly mocking. "I mean, I get it," Rodriguez continued, warming to his theme. "Everyone's got their soft side, but usually guys keep that private, you know? Maybe a photo in the wallet, not a billboard on their arm." "Maybe where he comes from, that's considered tough," Thompson suggested with a grin. Marcus finished dressing and began organizing his weapons and equipment. His movements were precise, methodical, but those watching could see the tension in his shoulders. "Hey, no offense," Chief Williams said, though his tone suggested he didn't particularly care if offense was taken. "We're just used to guys with more aggressive artwork. Skulls, death from above, that sort of thing." "Different strokes," Marcus replied quietly, not looking up from his rifle case. Over the next few days, the teasing about his tattoo became a running joke among the SEALs. During meals, during briefings, during downtime, someone always found a way to bring it up. They started calling him Picket Fence behind his back, though they were careful to keep it just quiet enough that it wouldn't be considered insubordination. The jokes ranged from mild ribbing to more pointed comments about whether someone who got sentimental tattoos had the killer instinct necessary for their line of work. Marcus endured it all with stoic silence, focusing on his job and trying to prove his worth through his actions. But the comments were wearing on him. Not because he was ashamed of his tattoo, quite the opposite. The image meant more to him than these men could possibly understand, and their mockery felt like they were disrespecting something sacred. During weapons cleaning one evening, Rodriguez brought up the tattoo again. "You know what I think?" he said, looking around to make sure he had an audience. "I think our army friend here is compensating for something. Maybe he's not as hard as his reputation suggests, so he got himself a reminder of what real men fight for." Several SEALs chuckled, and Marcus's hands stilled on his rifle. He looked up, his dark eyes meeting Rodriguez's gaze. "You think you know what real men fight for?" The question hung in the air, loaded with more weight than Rodriguez had expected. Something in Marcus's tone made the laughter die away. "I know we don't fight for picket fences and swing sets," Rodriguez replied, but his voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. Marcus went back to cleaning his weapon. "You fight for whatever gets you through the night, Rodriguez. Some guys fight for country, some for their brothers, some for the rush. Me? I fight for what's in that tattoo." "And what exactly is that supposed to mean?" Thompson asked. Marcus didn't answer. He finished cleaning his rifle, packed up his kit, and headed for his bunk. Behind him, the SEALs exchanged puzzled looks. There had been something in his voice, something that suggested there was more to the story than they understood. The next morning brought news of their upcoming mission. Intelligence had located a high-value target, a Taliban commander responsible for coordinating IED attacks throughout the region. He was holed up in a compound about 12 miles north of their position, in terrain that would require a delicate approach. Commander Mitchell spread a map on the briefing table and began outlining the operation. "We'll insert here." He pointed to a spot 2 miles from the target. "Move overland to establish an overwatch position on this ridge. The shot will be approximately 800 meters, well within range for our sniper." All eyes turned to Marcus, who studied the map carefully. "What about wind conditions?" he asked. "Variable. Could be tricky," Mitchell replied. "Think you can handle it, picket fence?" The nickname slipped out before Mitchell could stop himself, and several team members smirked. Marcus looked up from the map, his expression unreadable. "I can handle it, sir." "Good. We move out at 0400. Mitchell rolled up the map. "This is a joint operation, so let's make sure everyone knows their role. Rivera, you'll be providing overwatch and taking the shot when we give the signal. The rest of us will be in position to extract him if things go sideways." As the briefing broke up, Chief Williams sidled up to Marcus. "Big moment tomorrow, Army. Hope you don't choke when it matters." Marcus met his gaze steadily. "I don't choke. We'll see. It's different when you've got real operators depending on you, instead of just regular Army guys." The comment stung, but Marcus kept his expression neutral. "The bullet doesn't know what uniform I'm wearing." That night, Marcus lay on his bunk, staring at the ceiling. Around him, the other men slept or whispered quietly among themselves. He could hear fragments of conversation, jokes about his tattoo, speculation about whether the Army sniper would perform under pressure, discussions about how they'd cover for him if he missed the shot. Marcus touched his left shoulder where the tattoo lay hidden beneath his shirt. In his mind, he could see every detail of the image, the careful shading of the house, the expression on the little girl's face as she swung toward the sky, the gentle smile of the woman on the porch, the proud stance of the soldier pushing the swing. People saw the tattoo and assumed it was about what he was fighting for. They were right, but not in the way they thought. It wasn't about protecting an abstract idea of home and family. It was about something much more specific, much more personal, and much more painful than any of them could imagine. Tomorrow, he would take the shot. He would prove to these SEALs that he belonged here, that their mockery was misplaced. But even as he planned for the mission, part of him wondered what they would say if they knew the real story behind the tattoo they found so amusing. The truth was, something he'd never told anyone, something he carried like a weight in his chest. It was the reason he'd become a sniper, the reason he was so good at his job, and the reason their jokes cut deeper than they knew. But tomorrow would be about the mission, about proving himself to men who had already made up their minds about him. The story behind the tattoo could wait. It had waited this long already. As the base settled into the quiet rhythms of night, Marcus finally closed his eyes. In a few hours, he would have the chance to show these Navy SEALs what an Army sniper could do. He just hoped that when the moment came, the ghosts in his tattoo wouldn't interfere with the steady hands he needed to make the shot that would define his place in this unit. The mockery would end tomorrow, one way or another. Either he would prove himself worthy of their respect, or he would confirm their suspicions that the soldier with the sentimental tattoo didn't belong among warriors. Marcus knew which outcome he intended to deliver. In the darkness, he touched his shoulder one more time, drawing strength from the image etched in his skin. Tomorrow, they would see what he was truly capable of. And maybe, just maybe, they would begin to understand that there was more to Marcus Rivera than they had assumed. The laughter would stop. The question was whether it would be replaced by respect or disappointment. Marcus intended to make sure it was the former, no matter what it cost him. The pre-dawn air was crisp and still as the team moved silently through the rocky terrain toward their objective. Marcus adjusted the weight of his rifle, feeling the familiar comfort of the precision instrument across his back. Beside him, the SEALs moved like shadows, their equipment muffled, their breathing controlled. Whatever their opinion of him personally, Marcus had to admit they were professionals. Commander Mitchell raised his hand, signaling a halt. They had reached the ridge line that would serve as their overwatch position. Below them, the target compound sat like a small fortress in the valley, its walls casting long shadows in the moonlight. Marcus immediately began assessing the shot. Distance, approximately 820 meters. Elevation change, significant, dropping nearly 200 feet to the target. Wind, variable, with gusts coming from the northwest. Temperature, dropping as the sun rose, which would affect the bullet's trajectory. He set up his position with methodical precision, adjusting his bipod, checking his scope, calculating angles. The other team members spread out around him, establishing security and communication with base. Chief Williams positioned himself nearby, ostensibly to provide security, but clearly also to observe Marcus's performance. "Target compound is quiet," Rodriguez reported through his radio. "No movement visible." Marcus peered through his scope, scanning the buildings below. The intelligence report indicated their target, a Taliban commander known as Khalil, would likely emerge around sunrise for morning prayers. It was their best opportunity for a clean shot. "How you feeling, Army?" Chief Williams whispered. "Ready," Marcus replied without taking his eye from the scope. "Big difference between the shooting range and the real thing." Marcus had been in enough combat situations that the comment didn't rattle him, but he could hear the skepticism in Williams's voice. The SEAL was waiting for him to crack under pressure to prove that an Army sniper couldn't handle a high-stakes mission like this. Through his earpiece, Marcus heard Commander Mitchell's voice. "All positions report ready. Target should appear any minute now." The waiting was always the hardest part. Marcus controlled his breathing, keeping his heart rate steady, his mind focused. Around him, the other team members maintained their vigilance. But he could feel their eyes on him occasionally, watching for any sign of nervousness. As the first light of dawn touched the mountains, movement appeared in the compound below. A figure emerged from the main building, male, medium build, dressed in traditional Afghan clothing. Marcus tracked him through his scope, waiting for positive identification. "I have eyes on a possible target," Marcus whispered into his radio. "Describe," came Mitchell's immediate response. "Male, approximately 5'8", black beard, wearing a dark vest over white clothing, moving toward the eastern wall of the compound." There was a pause as Command verified the description against their intelligence. "That matches our target profile. Wait for positive confirmation before engaging." The figure below walked with purpose toward what appeared to be a prayer area. As he turned to face east, Marcus got a clear view of his profile through the scope. The facial features matched the photos they had studied during the briefing. "Positive identification confirmed," Marcus whispered. "Target acquired." "Roger that. You are cleared to engage." Marcus took a slow, steady breath. The wind had picked up slightly, and he made a minute adjustment to compensate. 820 meters. Dropping elevation. Crosswind from the northwest at approximately 8 miles per hour. He had made more difficult shots, but never with so many people watching and judging his every move. The target knelt, beginning his morning prayers. Marcus knew this was likely his best opportunity. The man would remain relatively still for several minutes. He settled the crosshairs on his target, exhaled slowly, and began applying pressure to the trigger. Just as he was about to fire, a child suddenly ran into view, chasing what appeared to be a ball that had rolled toward the prayer area. Marcus immediately lifted his finger from the trigger, his breath catching. "Hold, hold, hold," he whispered urgently into his radio. "Civilian in the area, child." Through his scope, he watched the Taliban commander look up from his prayers, smiling at the child. The man stood and gently guided the boy back toward the main building, away from the prayer area. It was a surprisingly tender moment that reminded Marcus that even their enemies were human beings with families. "Target is moving," Marcus reported. "Child is clear, but I've lost the shot angle." "Can you reacquire?" Mitchell's voice was tense. Marcus tracked the target through his scope as the man walked back toward the building. "Negative. Too much cover now." Beside him, he heard Chief Williams mutter something under his breath. Marcus couldn't make out the words, but the tone suggested frustration, possibly doubt about whether Marcus had really lost the shot or simply choked when the moment came. "Hold position," Mitchell ordered. "Target may emerge again." For the next 2 hours, they waited. The sun climbed higher, making the shot more difficult as heat shimmer began to distort the view through the scope. Marcus remained in position, ignoring the cramps in his legs, the sweat stinging his eyes, and the growing skepticism of his teammates. Finally, movement appeared again. The target emerged from a different building, this time with several other men. They gathered in an open courtyard, appearing to be in discussion about something. "I have multiple targets in view," Marcus reported. "Identify primary," Mitchell responded. Marcus studied the group through his scope. Their intelligence target was clearly visible, standing slightly apart from the others, gesturing as he spoke. "Primary target confirmed. Clear shot available." "Distance?" 840 meters. Wind has shifted to the east, approximately 5 miles per hour. "You are cleared to engage." This time, there were no children, no distractions. Marcus settled into the shot, making final adjustments for the increased distance and changed wind conditions. The crosshairs centered on the target's chest. He took a breath, let half of it out, and began his trigger squeeze. The rifle bucked against his shoulder with a suppressed crack. Through his scope, Marcus watched the bullet's flight seem to take forever. 840 meters at that elevation meant nearly a full second of flight time. He held his breath, watching. The target suddenly stumbled backward, clutching his chest, and collapsed. The other men in the courtyard scattered, shouting and looking around wildly for the source of the shot. "Target down," Marcus reported quietly. "Confirmed kill," Rodriguez added, watching through his own optics. "Clean shot." But their celebration was short-lived. The compound below erupted into activity. Armed men poured out of buildings, taking defensive positions and scanning the surrounding hills. Someone began firing an automatic weapon in their general direction, though the shots fell well short of their position. "Time to go," Mitchell ordered. "They'll have our general location figured out soon." The team began moving immediately, following their planned extraction route. Marcus packed his rifle quickly but carefully, then fell in line with the others as they made their way off the ridge. Behind them, the compound continued to buzz with activity, but the distance was too great for effective return fire. As they moved through the rocky terrain toward their extraction point, Chief Williams jogged up beside Marcus. "Nice shot," he said, and for the first time, his tone held genuine respect. "That was a hell of a thing." "Thank you," Marcus replied simply. "I have to admit, I wasn't sure you'd take it when that kid ran out there. A lot of guys would have taken the shot anyway." Marcus glanced at him. "Would you have?" Williams considered the question. "I don't know. Maybe. In the heat of the moment, with everyone watching, it would have been tempting." "The boy reminded me of someone," Marcus said quietly. They continued in silence for a few minutes before Williams spoke again. "Look, about the tattoo stuff. The guys were just busting your balls. Nothing personal." "I know. It's just, most of us have ink that's more aggressive, war-related. Yours is so normal," Marcus suggested. "I was going to say peaceful." They had reached a natural choke point in the terrain where the rest of the team was waiting. Commander Mitchell was on the radio with base, coordinating their extraction. When he finished the call, he turned to Marcus with a nod of approval. "Outstanding work back there. Clean shot, good judgment with the civilian. That's exactly the kind of precision we needed." "Thank you, sir. That target was responsible for at least a dozen IED attacks in this sector. You probably saved a lot of lives today." As they waited for their helicopter extraction, Marcus found himself thinking about the moment when the child had run into his shot. For just an instant, looking at that little boy, he had seen something else entirely. A different child, in a different place, at a different time. His hand unconsciously moved to his left shoulder, where his tattoo lay hidden beneath his uniform. The image inked into his skin wasn't just artwork. It was a memorial, a reminder, a burden he carried every day. The SEALs thought it was sentimental, soft, unrealistic. If only they knew how much reality that simple domestic scene represented. Rodriguez approached, interrupting his thoughts. "Hey, Rivera, I owe you an apology." "For what?" "The tattoo jokes. The picket fence comments. I was out of line." Marcus studied his face. "What changed your mind?" "The way you handled that shot. The discipline when the kid appeared. The precision under pressure." Rodriguez paused. "You don't get that kind of skill without serious motivation. Maybe your tattoo represents that motivation. Maybe it does. Want to tell us about it?" The question hung in the air between them. Around them, the other team members were listening, their earlier mockery replaced by genuine curiosity. Marcus looked at their faces, men who had accepted him as an equal now that he had proven himself in combat. But the story behind his tattoo wasn't something he shared lightly. It was too personal, too painful, too important. These men had earned his respect today, and perhaps he had earned theirs, but that didn't mean they were ready to hear the truth about the image on his arm. "Maybe another time," he said finally. Rodriguez nodded, understanding that some stories weren't told on demand. "Fair enough. But I want you to know, you're solid in my book, all our books." The sound of rotors announced the arrival of their extraction helicopter. As they gathered their gear and prepared to move to the landing zone, Marcus reflected on how much had changed in just a few hours. He had gone from being an outsider with a questionable tattoo to being a respected member of the team. But respect earned through marksmanship was just the beginning. The real test would come if and when the truth about his tattoo emerged. The peaceful domestic scene that had earned their mockery represented something far more complex and painful than they could imagine. It wasn't about what he was fighting for. It was about what he had failed to protect. As the helicopter lifted them away from the mission site, Marcus stared out at the Afghan landscape below. Somewhere down there, a Taliban commander was dead, killed by a bullet he had fired with hands steady enough to thread a needle. But those same hands had once been too slow, too late, to prevent a tragedy that had changed everything. The tattoo wasn't about hope or motivation or what real men fight for. It was about guilt, responsibility, and the weight of a moment when being the best sniper in the world hadn't been enough to save the people who mattered most. His teammates thought they knew him now, thought they understood what drove him. They had no idea how wrong they were or how much darker the truth behind his ink really was. But that revelation would have to wait for another day, another crisis, another moment when the past and present collided in ways none of them could anticipate. For now, it was enough that he had proven himself. The mockery had stopped, replaced by the respect of warriors who recognized skill when they saw it. But Marcus knew that respect was fragile, built on a foundation they didn't fully understand. When they finally learned the real story behind his tattoo, he wondered if that respect would survive the revelation of what had really happened in that peaceful yard with the white picket fence and the little girl on the swing. The truth was coming, whether he wanted it to or not. And when it did, everything would change again. 3 weeks after the successful mission, Marcus had settled into a routine with the SEAL team. The mockery about his tattoo had stopped completely, replaced by the easy camaraderie that develops between soldiers who have proven themselves to each other. He had taken 4 more precision shots since then, each one successful, cementing his reputation as one of the finest snipers the SEALs had ever worked with. It was during a quiet evening in the rec room that everything changed. The team was playing cards and sharing stories from previous deployments when Rodriguez mentioned something about home. "My kid's birthday is next week," he said, looking at photos on his phone. "She'll be 7. Man, I hate missing these things." "How old is she now?" Thompson asked, leaning over to look at the pictures. "Just turned 7. Look at this. She lost her first tooth last month." Rodriguez showed them a photo of a little girl with a gap-toothed grin, sitting on a swing in their backyard. Marcus glanced at the photo and immediately looked away, his face tightening almost imperceptibly. But Chief Williams noticed the reaction. "You got kids, Rivera?" Williams asked. The question hung in the air. Marcus had been dreading this moment for weeks, knowing that eventually the conversation would turn to families and personal lives. He set down his cards carefully. "Had a daughter," he said quietly. The tone of his voice made everyone stop what they were doing. Had. Past tense. The implications were immediate and sobering. "I'm sorry, man," Rodriguez said softly. "What happened?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. When he looked up, his eyes held a pain that none of them had seen before, despite all the combat they'd shared. Her name was Sophie. She would have been 8 last month. "Would have been?" Thompson's voice was barely a whisper. Marcus nodded slowly. "She died 2 years ago, along with my wife, Emma." The room fell completely silent. Outside, they could hear the distant sound of helicopters and the normal bustle of base operations. But inside the rec room, the only sound was breathing. "How?" Williams asked gently. Marcus stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Afghan landscape. "Home invasion. I was deployed in Iraq at the time, had been for 6 months. It was supposed to be my last tour before I took a stateside assignment to be home more." He paused, his shoulders rigid with tension. "3 men broke into our house outside Fort Carson. It was a random thing. They thought the house was empty because they knew I was deployed. Emma and Sophie were supposed to be at her mother's that night, but Sophie had gotten sick, so they stayed home." Rodriguez slowly put away his phone, the photos of his own daughter suddenly feeling like an intrusion. "The neighbors heard screaming around 10 p.m. By the time police arrived," Marcus's voice trailed off. "Emma had tried to protect Sophie. They found them together in Sophie's bedroom." The silence stretched on. Marcus turned back to face his teammates, his expression carefully controlled, but his eyes betraying the depth of his pain. The worst part was the timeline. The break-in happened at 10:07 p.m. Colorado time. I was on overwatch duty in Ramadi at that exact moment, watching through my scope, protecting soldiers I'd never met. I was one of the best snipers in the Army, trained to see everything, to protect people from a distance. But I couldn't see what mattered most. I couldn't protect the 2 people I loved more than anything in the world. Chief Williams leaned forward. "Jesus, Marcus, I can't even imagine." "The tattoo," Thompson said suddenly, understanding flooding his face. "The house, the swing, the family." Marcus nodded. "It's our house. That's Sophie on the swing. I took that photo the day before I deployed. Emma is on the porch, and that's me pushing Sophie. It was the last perfect moment we had together." Rodriguez stood up abruptly and walked to the other side of the room, his hands shaking slightly. "Oh, God, we've been... all those jokes." "You didn't know," Marcus said simply. "But we should have," Williams said, his voice thick with emotion. "We should have seen... Man, we're such assholes." Marcus shook his head. "You reacted the way anyone would. A guy with a domestic tattoo in a unit full of warriors? I get why it seemed soft, unrealistic." "There's nothing soft about carrying that much pain," Thompson said quietly. "The guilt is what made me the sniper I am today," Marcus continued. "Every target I eliminate, every life I save with a precision shot, I'm trying to balance the scales, trying to make up for the one time my skills didn't matter, couldn't help." He sat back down, his hands steady despite the emotional weight of his revelation. "After the funeral, I requested immediate redeployment. Couldn't stand being stateside, surrounded by reminders. I figured if I was going to be a soldier, I might as well be the best soldier possible. So I trained harder, shot better, became more precise. Every mission is dedicated to them." The rec room remained silent for several more minutes. Finally, Rodriguez spoke up. "Is that why you hesitated when the kid ran into your shot window?" "Yeah. For a second he looked just like..." Marcus's voice caught slightly. "Just like Sophie when she was younger. Same age. Same way of moving. I couldn't risk it." "But you still made the shot when it was clear," Williams pointed out. "Because that's what Emma would have wanted. She used to tell me that my job mattered, that I was protecting other families. She'd be proud that I didn't let emotion compromise the mission, but also that I didn't risk an innocent child." Just then, Commander Mitchell walked into the rec room, his expression unusually serious. "Rivera, I need to speak with you privately." Marcus looked up, immediately alert. "What's wrong, sir?" "Just received some intel from back home. Can we step outside?" The tone in Mitchell's voice made everyone in the room tense. Marcus stood and followed the commander outside, leaving his teammates exchanging worried glances. Outside, Mitchell turned to face Marcus, his expression grave. "I just got a call from CID. They've made arrests in connection with your family's murder. Marcus felt his knees weaken slightly. Arrests? 3 men, just like the original investigation suggested. They've been running a string of home invasions targeting military families. DNA evidence finally caught up with them. Marcus leaned against the wall, processing the information. After 2 years of not knowing, of carrying the uncertainty along with the grief, they finally had answers. There's more, Mitchell continued. The investigation revealed something else. The break-in wasn't random. Marcus looked up sharply. What do you mean? They specifically targeted your house because they knew you were deployed. Someone had been providing them with information about which soldiers were overseas and when their families would be alone. The blood drained from Marcus's face. Someone was feeding them intel? A clerk at the base personnel office. He's been arrested, too. Apparently, he'd been selling deployment schedules to this gang for months. Your family wasn't the only one targeted, but they were... Mitchell paused. They were the only ones who were home when they shouldn't have been. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. If Sophie hadn't gotten sick, if they'd gone to Emma's mother's house like they planned, they would have found an empty house and moved on to the next target, Mitchell finished quietly. The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. All this time, he'd carried guilt about not being there to protect them. But the truth was even crueler. They had died because someone had betrayed the very system designed to protect military families. There's something else, Mitchell said, his voice dropping even lower. The personnel clerk who sold the information, his name is David Mitchell. Marcus stared at the commander, confusion replacing shock. Mitchell? Like, he's my younger brother. The words hung in the desert air between them. Commander James Mitchell, the man who had welcomed Marcus to the unit, who had praised his shooting, who had been leading him in combat for weeks, was related to the person responsible for his family's death. Marcus felt the world tilt around him. Your brother? Mitchell nodded, his face pale. I knew David was having financial problems, but I never imagined. When CID called and told me the name of the clerk they'd arrested, I couldn't believe it. Then they explained what he'd been doing, and I saw your name on the victim list. Marcus backed away, his mind racing. You knew? This whole time? You knew? No! I swear to God, I had no idea until 20 minutes ago. When they told me David had been selling deployment schedules, I went through the victim list. Your name jumped out immediately. I put it together. The timing, your family, why you'd requested immediate redeployment. Commander Mitchell's voice was shaking now, his usual composure completely gone. Marcus, I swear on my mother's grave I had no idea what he was doing. If I had known... Marcus looked at this man who had been his commanding officer, who had earned his respect, who had just revealed himself to be connected to the worst moment of Marcus's life. The irony was overwhelming. He had been serving under the brother of the man who had essentially signed his family's death warrant. All those missions, Marcus said slowly, all those shots I took under your command, you were evaluating the skills that grief gave me. I was evaluating a damn fine soldier who happens to be dealing with unimaginable loss, Mitchell replied firmly. What my brother did, that's on him, not me. But I understand if you can't serve under me anymore. Marcus stared at him for a long moment. Behind Mitchell, through the rec room window, he could see his SEAL teammates watching anxiously, clearly aware that something significant was happening. The tattoo, Marcus said finally. When the guys were making jokes about it, did you know then? No. I participated in the jokes myself, remember? I called you picket fence during the mission briefing. If I had known what that image represented, what you'd been through, Mitchell shook his head. I would never have allowed that disrespect. Marcus felt a strange sense of completion, as if pieces of a puzzle he didn't know he'd been solving had suddenly clicked into place. The man whose leadership he'd grown to respect was connected to his deepest trauma. The unit that had come to accept him had done so without understanding the true weight of his burden. "What happens now?" Marcus asked. "That's up to you," Mitchell replied. "I can arrange for your immediate transfer if you want. No questions asked, no negative marks on your record. You've more than proven yourself here." Marcus looked through the window again at his teammates. These men who had mocked his tattoo, then respected his skills, then been horrified by his story. Men who had become his brothers in arms despite the rocky beginning. "Or," Marcus asked, "or you stay. We finish this deployment together. We continue the mission, knowing the truth about everything. Your loss, my brother's betrayal, what brought you here." Mitchell's voice was steady now. "Your choice, Rivera. Either way, you have my respect and my apology." Marcus was quiet for a long time, processing everything. The arrests, the betrayal, the connection to his commanding officer. It was almost too much to absorb. "The men who killed them," he said finally, "will they face justice? Life sentences minimum. The evidence is overwhelming. And your brother? 25 to life for conspiracy to commit murder. What he did, there's no forgiveness for that, family or not." Marcus nodded slowly. "He destroyed more than just my family. He destroyed trust, security, the safety that military families are supposed to feel." "Yes, he did." They stood in silence as the sun set over the Afghan mountains, two men bound together by tragedy and duty in ways neither had imagined possible. Finally, Marcus spoke. "I'll stay." Mitchell looked surprised. "Are you sure? No one would blame you for—" "I'm sure. The mission matters more than personal connections or grudges. My family would want me to finish what I started." "Thank you," Mitchell said quietly. As they walked back toward the rec room, Marcus touched his shoulder where his tattoo lay hidden. The image of his family would always be with him, but now it carried different meaning. It wasn't just about guilt and loss anymore. It was about justice served, truth revealed, and the complex ways that fate connected people across distance and time. His teammates would learn about this new development, this impossible connection between their commander and Marcus's tragedy. But they would also see how he chose to handle it, with professionalism, forgiveness, and dedication to their mission. The tattoo that had once earned their mockery had revealed itself to be a symbol of unimaginable strength and loss. Now it would become something else entirely, a reminder that even in the darkest circumstances, duty and honor could transcend personal pain. As Marcus opened the door to rejoin his team, he knew the laughter about his ink would never return. But in its place was something more valuable, the respect of warriors who finally understood the true depth of what drove their brother in arms, and what it really meant to carry the weight of love, loss, and service in the same heart. The story was finally complete, even if the healing would take much longer.